Hey everybody, welcome into an emergency edition of the NESN Bruins podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined as always by Logan Mullen, and we are here to review the first 6 games of the Stanley Cup Final and preview Wednesday night's winner-take-all matchup at TD Garden. Logan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How about you? Sound the sirens. Big
right,
emergency pod today.
Yep. I actually, we're taping this on today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
So Monday, Tuesday, good nights to kind of catch up on some sleep.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't know how these guys do it. They're playing hockey. And I feel exhausted just watching hockey.
I know, yeah.
So God bless them. But here we are, like you said, we're going to kind of just, we'll discuss what's kind of gotten us to this point, and we'll do the best we can to preview Game 7. We were kind of just talking about this out in the newsroom, and kind of like nothing we say actually matters. More so than usual.
Yeah.
It really never doesn't matter.
We sound like a couple of nihilists, but I mean, we can talk about this for 6 hours.
Yeah, and it's just nothing, what happened in Game 6 doesn't matter. What happened in the series up to this point doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter who the referees are. None of this stuff. It's just one game for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about this actually before I came in today. And, there's this big narrative that, it's the first time the Bruins can win the Cup on home ice, this and that. How many years it have been for the Canucks in 2011, and they just got dump trucked on home ice in Game 7.
Right.
So it's like them being at home doesn't matter. Brad Marchand kind of alluded to that today. That's it's just going to play. It's cool that we're at home and whatnot, but it's none of this stuff really matters. It really is just another game. There's been no consistency throughout this series that would lead you to believe
that's the other thing too,
okay,
right?
There's these trends here. So
yeah, the home team really
matters.
has not played very well in this series.
Yeah,
I think what is the home? Are they 3-3? Because St. Louis won twice here.
Man,
who cares?
You're catching me here.
So they're 2-2, 3. I don't know how the math works out. It's a terrible way of phrasing it, the way that I just did.
Yeah,
but
the Blues have won 2 at home.
Yeah, and the Bruins
have won 2.
1 at home.
1 at home.
Right.
God, wow.
Yes, math is hard.
I'm looking at it right here.
I was going to say.
I've got the results right
So
in
the
front
Bruins
of
have won 2 at home and 2 on the road, so that equals 4. So I guess this is no. All right, so actually the Blues have had more success in Boston than the Bruins have in this series. But again, I don't think
the Blues were very bad at home all postseason.
Right. Yeah,
too,
they're
so
6-7. I think they're going to be one of the only teams ever to win the Stanley Cup without winning a home game, or without having a home winning record at home. So something to keep in mind. So actually, before we really get into it, I went back and listened to the beginning of our first episode earlier this season.
Oh man,
and
a couple young lads.
Nick Goss. And Nick Goss, rest in peace, Nick Goss. He was. I think he was more positive. He said that the Bruins, he said anything other than a top 3 seed in the East would be a disappointment. I said that the Bruins also should be a top 3 seed. I even said the Atlantic Division might end up having 3 of the top 5 records in the entire NHL.
Look at you.
We had 2 out of 3 for the Bruins and Tampa Bay.
Leafs were close.
And the Leafs were 7th, so I came close on that. And I said I would take them getting back to the second round. And you said expectations were probably a little bit too high for the Bruins. So
I was cynical because they didn't do much.
You were the lowest among the 3 of us.
Really? Yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, I was a little optimistic throughout that podcast. And at the end, I thought about it. I was like, you know what? This team might actually stink.
Yeah.
And so, they really hadn't done much during the offseason. We thought that the loss of Riley Nash and Tim Schauer was going to be worse than it was, but now this is the best fourth line the Bruins have had in years, and then they got Charlie Coyle to replace Riley Nash. So.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And I think we all kind of just assumed this is probably a caveat that should be discussed pretty much with every Bruins discussion when it comes to the 2018-19 season, is that we all kind of were expecting them to run in Tampa Bay and fall on their faces. And we will never know because of Tampa losing to Columbus. So that's something that...
Well, and we've talked about that before earlier in the postseason. If, Tampa getting bounced kind of minimizes the possibility of the Bruins winning the Cup because they played 2 wild card teams and the Leafs, which the Leafs would probably be winning the Cup if they got through.
It's interesting. To that point, I think that I felt that way through 3 rounds. I feel like, and this could be recency bias, and the fact that it feels like the Stanley Cup Final has been going on for 3 months now.
Half our lives.
I think I feel my thoughts in that regard have lessened. I am more because and now, especially when we're here, right? Like one game, literally one game for the Stanley Cup. You know, Bruce Cassidy mentioned it today. They've played, 105, 106 games just to get to this point. And really, when you think about it, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing has changed, except you just have a chance to win the Cup. Like, just the totality of this entire quest, this journey, makes it, like, it's so hard. Like, looking back at what we said after the Eastern Conference Final, shame on us for thinking that, like, this might be diminished in some way. Because when you really just sit there and it's like, you watch these games in and out every night, and especially over the course of a 7-game series like this, you realize just how goddamn hard it is to win this.
Well, and I think the thing,
no matter who you're playing.
Right, and I think in some senses the way we kind of refocus that for ourselves is, if you look at January 1st and on,
right,
I mean,
that's
they've
a good
run
point,
into
yeah.
3 of the hottest teams in the NHL. You know, the Blue Jackets were, I think, right outside of the playoff picture at the trade deadline. The Hurricanes and the Blues were among, you know, both look like they were going to be sellers. We all know the story with the Blues. So yeah, it on paper it might seem like, well, you know, they are quite literally playing a team that was the worst team in the NHL at certain points this season, really not that long ago. But, you know, credit to them for turning it around, and it's, you know, we're in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final because of it.
Yeah, and I think they're also in the second and third rounds, just not as much sizzle with it being Columbus
Also true.
and Carolina. But I think my issue with Carolina is, like, they just got hot. Like, I don't think that they were that talented.
They caught lightning in a bottle.
You can see it with St. Louis. I think that's kind of a transition into our discussion of the first 6 games of this series, which has it been good? I mean, it's been good because it's the Stanley Cup Final, and I think these two teams have grown to hate each other. But you look at it, it's like there's been a couple of blowouts in here, a couple of unsightly games, and that kind of just, tells you where, it's easy to point to success. Like, the blowouts have been the Bruins, like the real muddy games have been the Blues. I don't know. What's your biggest takeaway through 6 games?
I don't know if this is an extreme take or not, but I've been thoroughly unimpressed with the Blues. And I think that if the Bruins lose tomorrow, it should be considered a colossal failure.
Wow, that is a hot take.
Yeah,
it's a very
because
hot,
and you alluded to it right there that the blowouts have gone to the Bruins.
Yeah.
Pretty much any time the Blues have won, it's been close. You can make your arguments about the officiating in Game 5 and whatnot, but if the Bruins actually played to their capabilities, like the Bruins are barely getting by with almost no contributions from their top line. And that's not to diminish some of the skill that the Blues have.
Or the job that they've been doing on those top lines.
Right, exactly. Like, I think Ryan O'Reilly's been great, and the Bruins have had their hands full with him. There's obviously some skill on that top line, but, I mean, Schwartz really hasn't done all that much.
Nothing.
And even since the early games, I haven't really been overly impressed with Tarasenko. So
I mean, it's like, it's a good point. Ryan O'Reilly's been a stud, and they've cleaned up around Binnington.
Colton Parayko's been great, and Alex Pietrangelo been a horse. But what else, has turned your head? Jordan Binnington's been really average, which I think to some extent we might have expected. I mean, he's not exactly a fresh prospect. I know a lot of people act like he's, 19, 20 years old. He's 25, 26. Like, he's toiled.
He'll be 26 next month.
Yeah, he's toiled in the minors for a little while. So with everything that the Bruins had going for them, they had won 7 straight games entering this series. They had more than enough opportunities to essentially run away with this series, right? But in Game 2, that overtime before Gunnarsson's winner, that was probably the worst few minutes of hockey I've seen the Bruins play all year. So they're really, honestly, I don't think that they should be in this position where they have to win it in a Game 7. But alas, they are.
Right.
And at a certain, you have to tip your cap to the Blues for what they've been able to do. But having watched every minute of every game, I've sat here wondering, like, why is this team here, and why are the Bruins having so much trouble with them, other than the fact that, they play heavy?
And I think that may be part of the reason, or might be part of, like, the logic is that it's hard to do that effectively every night, right? Like, that's part of it.
Right, yeah.
And I think, Binnington has been good in bounce backs. Kind of just looking at the game logs right now, he's lost 2 games just twice.
Right, his
all
numbers
postseason.
Afterwards have been great.
They haven't lost 2 in a row since the Dallas series. And just looking at it here, it's like In the first round, he gave up 6 goals in a game against Winnipeg. Came back and made 37 saves on 39 shots in an overtime loss. He gave up, 4 goals against Dallas. Came back, gave up 2 goals the next game. He gave up 5 against San Jose. Came back and gave up 2. 5 against San Jose. Came back and made 29 of 30 saves. Mixing a shutout in there as well. He's been good in this series following a loss. And he did not look good at all in Game 5. Game 6. Jeez, it's hard to keep track. So it's something to keep in mind as well. Maybe he's getting leaky. He's just kind of a weird dude as well. I don't know how he's going to respond to a Game 7, but sometimes that works in a goalie's favor. They're kind of hard to figure out. They're tough nuts to crack, if you will. I think it's interesting. Kind of to your point, maybe the Bruins have outscored St. Louis 21-14 in this Cup final, but they've only outshot them by 5. I think that kind of speaks to how good Rask has been. It also speaks to the power play, which has been up and down as well. And I think that's going to be a focal point in Game 7, right? I mean, the NHL is going back to Rooney and Dwyer for Game 7, so I think that's the right call.
That's an admission of guilt, too, even though they never came out and actually said, hey, we screwed stuff up in Game 5.
They admitted to guilt twice, too, because there was a suspension on a play that wasn't called. So, just even to have the hearing is an admission of guilt. It's actually a really interesting dynamic, too, of this entire run. If the Bruins end up winning the Cup, it's going to be a nice little, feather in their cap to kind of realize in that Toronto series that maybe you got to play a little differently and you can't match their speed and you have to get physical, and they were able to do that, especially in Game 2. And now in this series, you have the speed advantage. You can't necessarily go, physical. The Blues don't have that kind of versatility. The Maple Leafs didn't have that. So that's interesting to kind of note that for the Bruins, and we'll find out on Wednesday whether that ends up, ultimately mattering. Again, it's just another thing to kind of point out with how, kind of chameleon-ish way to kind of go about things. That's what you have to do this time of year. You also have to ride hot goaltending. Tuukka Rask, I think, has been by far the better goalie in this series.
Yep, I'd agree.
He looks like the favorite for the Conn Smythe, which we'll get into a little bit more later. I think one thing I do want to touch on, I guess this is kind of a review/preview type of thing. The Bruins line juggling has been a source of source of focus. I don't know, whatever. It's a storyline. I didn't want to say storyline.
Had the microscope on.
Yeah. So I thought kind of a gutsy move by Bruce Cassidy with the season on the line to put Carson Coleman in the lineup. Yeah. It makes sense, especially in hindsight, and it kind of, to that point where you have the advantage in speed, to put him in for a guy like David Backes gives you even more of an advantage from that standpoint. But there had to have been some trepidation, at least, about putting Coleman in the lineup.
Yeah, I would think so. And before Game 6, I had written for NESN.com why putting Coleman in for Backes was the right move. And essentially my thing, and I think that this remains for Game 7, is that whatever inherent risk you take on by playing Coleman based on inexperience or whatever it's going to be is much more worth it. What the challenge or the risk that you take on is much more worth it than whatever you're losing by taking David Backes out of the lineup. And we saw through 5 games, St. Louis is physical, St. Louis is physical, it's giving the Bruins trouble at times. David Backes was around for all but one of those games, right? So it's not like he had made such a profound impact that it was like you're taking away this guy that was, going to have a huge, it was going to be a huge void to fill, essentially. I mean, they were more comfortable dressing Stephen Kampfer. Yeah. And I guess, that, as Bruce Cassidy admitted, was more of a, precautionary thing just because they didn't know how Chara was going to be. And the other thing with that, too, and this has been my thing pretty much all postseason, is it kills me when Bruce Cassidy puts guys in that he knows he's only going to play 7 minutes, 8 minutes, something like that. And I thought, before I looked it up, I was like, he's only going to play Coleman for like 7 minutes. Well, looking at it, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think Backes' average time on ice entering Game 6 was something like 9 minutes 10 seconds, 9 minutes 30 seconds, something in that range. Yeah, and Coleman's was like 10:50. I was very surprised with that. And he used them in Game 6. So my thing is, don't put guys in that you're just going to have to shorten the bench because of their existence. You don't need that in this situation. Put guys in that you're going to use. And I get the whole thing about, this might be Backes' only chance to win a cup. It's against the Blues, all that. You can't assume that you're actually going to win. You don't want to put David Backes in for a good story. He can stand right on level 3, right at ice level when there's a minute left. And if the Bruins are going to win the cup, they'll put a little carpet out. He'll walk right out. He'll celebrate with everybody. It'll be fine. I don't want David Backes anywhere near, particularly the second line, but anywhere near the ice for Game 7.
And to your point, too, like I think that would have been, and again, this is somewhat with the benefit of hindsight, that would have been the case with how Coleman played, even if he hadn't scored. Like he
had so much energy.
And I think, I've heard other people mention this as well. I think having him in there kind of makes Jake DeBrusk better. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it makes David Krejci a whole lot better.
The numbers are a lot better.
Right, and I don't know. Krejci was okay in Game 6. I thought DeBrusk was really good. He seemed to have a lot more jump, and I think it's one of those things where maybe he's worried about kind of dragging Backes behind him, or he's. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know the the mechanics of the forecheck
the dynamic
as well of a lot of people. But like maybe it's something he doesn't get in as deep because he doesn't want to he doesn't want to overcommit and get caught going the other way. I don't know. They're probably it just seems to work better, and they may have caught lightning in the bottle, and they just have to hope that it continues into Game 7. But kind of counter to your point, but also making the same point, like if Coleman comes out and sucks in Game 7. It doesn't matter, though. Yeah. Like, it's Game 7. Then staple his ass to the bench, and it's like, whatever. Like, you're probably going to do that with Backes anyway.
That was also my point, too, in the story that I had written was, if you're leaning on Carson Coleman to save your season, that is a problem. That means other things have gone so nuclear and so wrong that you are leaning on a guy who most people didn't even know existed up until January or February, whenever he got that first call up. So you just sit him on the bench and don't play him. But under no uncertain terms should Carson Coleman be looked upon to save your season.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It sounds like Matt Grzelcyk lost in Game 2 to a concussion. It's hard to say. Like there was a lot of momentum. It felt like for him to play in Game 5 in Boston.
Yeah, it did seem that way, and then it trended downwards.
And then it was just one of those things. It even was reported by hockey insider Christian Fourier on WEEI that Grzelcyk would be in, and Grzelcyk was not in.
Astounded he got that wrong.
Yeah, so swing and a miss there. So I think that's part of where a lot of that momentum came from. But it looks like as far as or as recently as Tuesday morning at practice, Coleman was out there in the red sweater again.
Grzelcyk.
Or excuse me, Jesus Christ, Grzelcyk. He was out there in the red sweater as well again. So it's not. He could play.
These are weird, because sometimes all it takes is morning skate tomorrow for him to be clear.
But I was just seeing like tweets from reporters there who kind of were reading between the lines and didn't seem very optimistic that he would play. I guess my question to you is, if he's ready, would you play him?
Well, so this might be a bit of a conspiracy that I want to tackle first, and I don't know if this is something you can do, but Grzelcyk was leading the second power play unit during practice today. Could they be keeping him in the red no contact jersey as a smoke screen? Like, could they do that little gamesmanship?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, I don't want to assume that he's fine because head injuries are so fickle, and so I don't want to put that on the Bruins or anything. And that's just, floating theory that's like, you keep him in the red no contact jersey today. You don't have to clear him until tomorrow. I don't know how.
I don't think so, because he was on the he was skating with the power play unit
in previous practice.
Again, at Game 5 as well.
Yeah.
So and that actually was the thing that when I saw that, I'm like, wow, he might be back in.
Right.
Because it's like, if they're, that's something where you think at practice you're working on things and you're fine tuning things. You want the guys who are actually going to be in there for the game. So I don't know if I'd read too much into that. That being said, I don't think A is necessarily tied to B. Like, I think they could be messing with the Blues anyway, whether they think he's going to play or not. But like I guess, do you put him in if he's ready? Like, do you put him in for John Moore? Like, it's
so as I was telling you beforehand, and I don't know if this take is hot, but if Grzelcyk is in, I would rather see Connor Clifton sit and you play Moore on his offside.
I guess.
And part of that, again, for me, goes down to usage. I don't know what it is, but I feel like Clifton's sort of fallen out of favor with Bruce Cassidy over the last few games. Just looking at the numbers in Game 6, played 10-19. John Moore played 17-06. When everybody had to step up.
That's true.
In, Game 4, when Chara went down, John Moore played 19 minutes. Clifton played 18. So I've been impressed with what John Moore's been able to do. I feel like at times Clifton's gotten a little bit too over-aggressive, and it's burned the Bruins at certain points. And also, if the Bruins are trying to set, and this kind of goes back to the Coleman thing too, where the whole, weather the storm versus create the storm or whatever he says. I feel like by putting Coleman in instead of Backus and saying, okay, we're going to try and outskate you, that was their way of saying we're going to impose our will on you. I think if they're going to try and continue to do that, John Moore is, in terms of pure skating ability, the best skating defenseman that the Bruins have. And for me, it makes the most sense to keep him out there with Grzelcyk, who's your best guy at clearing the zone, best with the puck on his stick. So
yeah, he's good at kind of erasing some things as well defensively. I like that idea.
And Moore's played on his right side plenty of times this year. So
seems unlikely. I think if I was to guess anything, it just doesn't feel like it's something that's going to happen because I don't know. Do you really? I go back and forth on it because part of me is like, why change? Like they haven't looked at it especially good, but do you want to risk it with Grzelcyk and put him in there and risk him not?
Right, and I get that too, and I think that you're not necessarily. You know what you know when you have Moore and Clifton out there just from what they've done. But if they do put Grzelcyk back in, I'm just looking at it now, and I completely forgot about this. But in Game 5, when they were playing the 7 defensemen, they only used Clifton for 640. Steven Kampfer skated more. Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason, he has just kind of fallen out of favor lately. And that goes back to my point of, especially in Game 7, you should be playing guys that you know you're going to use.
Yeah.
At times the roles were kind of reversed this year where it seemed like, Bruce Cassidy would prefer to play Connor Clifton instead of John Moore, as evidenced by the fact that John Moore was scratched at times during the earlier rounds and Connor Clifton played. But with where they're at now, Cassidy's clearly more comfortable with Moore than he is Clifton. So I think that you might as well get some mileage out of John Moore.
Cool. It sounds like Chris Wagner might be able to get back after when he break his hand. We don't even really, they never actually said.
Yeah.
Blocked a shot. I think we're both on the same page here. It just sucks for Chris Wagner, but I don't think it makes sense to put him in.
Yeah, and I think people will conveniently forget that he has not been great this postseason. I mean, he had been healthy scratch, and I think that game was Chari was out. Was it for Game 3? Somebody was,
I think
somebody was injured.
They were shuffling a lot at that point.
Right, and Chris Wagner had been healthy scratched for a little bit. And he just, for as good as he was during the regular season, he just hasn't been great during the postseason. I don't see, you certainly can't disrupt the fourth line.
Right.
And, I mean, you certainly can't disrupt the third line either. I mean, the third line's been arguably your best line. And I've seen a lot of people calling for taking Danton Heinen out. I think if you're arguing that Danton Heinen should sit for Game 7, you're not allowed to talk about hockey because outside of Bergeron and Nordstrom, he's probably your best defensive forward. It hasn't been a game or a series that's been defined by putting up gaudy scoring numbers. And so why would you ever take out one of your better defensive forward in a game that's being played along the boards like that? And when a heavy forecheck is kind of what's been mattering. So that to me makes no sense. So I don't see who you put Wagner in for that makes you any better, especially when he hasn't played for a month or it's been about a month.
I agree.
Since Game 3, the conference final.
All right. I don't know what else we want to talk about. The fact that Zdeno Chara is playing hockey right now just blows my mind. I think that's something that's been one of the bigger storylines this entire Cup final. I think that will be like the lasting image as well if he ends up coming back, and you're going to see the Game 5 ovation and just him lifting the cup if they can find a way to win. But I just think it kind of is almost like literally unfathomable for us to kind of realize what he's doing. Like I saw him come out onto the ice for Game 5 for practice before Game 5 for the morning skate. And like just watching him walk with his face bouncing, like his head moving side to side, like that has to hurt just walking.
I know.
The fact that he's playing is ridiculous.
And the guy was writing out answers to a pool reporter before Game 5.
Which again, you want to talk about gamesmanship, there might be some of that as well.
Right.
I'm sure it's just the fact that he's even talking at all continues to. I just would be like, no, I'm going to do everything I can not to feel pain in my face.
Whether they win or lose, breakup day this year is going to be a hell of a time with all the injuries that these guys must be going through.
And it seems like, and I guess that's one thing to kind of touch on as well. I think if you're ever going to get the first line to wake up, and it kind of started to in Game 6, but maybe
That Marchand goal was big.
Maybe I'm just talking about Patrice Bergeron because it was Sean Corrali actually who was in on the forecheck and led to that Pastrnak goal that the first line was able to score. Bergeron was the only minus in Game 6 for the Bruins.
That's right.
He's winning 53% of his faceoffs. He hasn't looked right. That line hasn't really looked right.
His minutes have been down.
His minutes are way down. He's still killing penalties, but 5-on-5 play he hasn't been out there a ton. There might be something up with Marchand as well. Like we go back to the scrimmage, that was an issue for some people.
His aversion to shoot, so weird.
It's so weird, and it actually happened in Game 6, right before he scored. Ironically, because I tweeted about it and I looked like an idiot because it's like he must seriously have something wrong with his hand or something because he had a wide open shot coming down the left wing, kind of just dropped past it back to no one again for what feels like the 48th time this month.
I know.
And he ends up scoring like 20 seconds later on just a blistering shot from the right wing. So I think if you're the Bruins, the hope is like even if these guys are injured, you're able to scrape the bottom of the barrel one more time. And I think if you're going to get it from anybody, it's going to be Patrice Bergeron. So if you're looking for, not to go out on a limb here, but if you're looking for an X factor or whatever you want to call it for Game 7,
I think that's good. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he plays his best game of the series. I mean, it wouldn't be saying much, but like look what he did in Game 7 against Toronto. Look what he's done in Game 7s in the past. He comes to play when it matters most.
If Bergeron plays well in Game 7, because I don't think he's played particularly well in pretty much any game this series. If Bergeron plays well in Game 7, I see no way that the Bruins lose.
It's like the one thing that hasn't come around, right? Like
right.
At this point,
everybody else has.
Or everything. Like the power play got right. The
penalty kill's been nuts.
Yeah,
all series.
Tuukka's been awesome. Like and it's just everybody else. Like it's, even like you mentioned, like the first line started to get right. Both Marchand and Pastrnak scored. The second line's kind of finding its groove, especially with Coleman in there. But like the only thing that really hasn't changed yet is Patrice Bergeron. And I'm with you 100%. If he comes and gives you the effort that you're used to seeing from him, and if he can find a way to score a goal, even it's over. Like that's the one thing.
And like you said, I mean, if there's anyone that's going to dig deep, it's probably him. Especially knowing now too that this is it. Like it's not like they have a 3-2 lead going into Game 6.
Right.
So
it's so there's that. Is there any other lingering things you want to touch on before we make our predictions?
The Bruins, when you think anyone will retire?
They're probably hoping David Backes.
It'd be Chara or Backes, right? I see no way Backes retires.
Chara is an interesting. Backes shouldn't. Like, why would you walk away from that money?
Yeah.
Chara, I don't know. It makes sense, I guess, but he just seems like a guy who wants to continue to play until they tell him he can't.
Right.
And
I don't think ending on a high note necessarily matters to him.
Right. I just wonder if, and I don't think it is, but I guess the only thing would be like, is this Cup final kind of made him reassess things where it's like, getting your jaw broken sucks. Like,
right.
Do you really want to go through that? Especially if they win again, where he's got 2 cups, he can walk out on top. This was his team. Like this era was the Zdeno Chara era, and Patrice Bergeron. But he was the guy who led them to that. He comes back. He's the hero, even if he doesn't play well. It all is written there for him. But again, he's kind of like Tom Brady. I just think he likes it too much.
He's one of those guys too that doesn't, to me, read like the kind of guy that needs to have a storybook ending. He doesn't need the Peyton Manning or whatever, however you want to look at it. Where it's like, he wins his cup and he rides off into the sunset and everyone loves him.
Yeah, when he retires, it might just be like he'll go back to writing the letter, like a note, and he's just writes it down. He's like, hey, I retire.
All right, that's
puts it on Instagram.
But yeah, I think him and Backes would be the only ones who would be even under some sort of consideration for retiring.
I agree. It wouldn't be shocking if like Patrice Bergeron did it at some. You know what I mean? Like that's the one that
I've thought about that one too. But Bergeron, how old is he? He's 30.
Yeah, I know. I'm not predicting it at all. I don't think it's anywhere close time for him to be done. But I just think that's like one of those ones where it's like, oh, that's really surprising, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I
don't think so either.
So all right, that's interesting. Halak. See ya. Who knows?
Poor bastard hasn't played a single minute.
Yeah, that's why the Bruins have one game away from the Stanley Cup. Sure. All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it for me.
Torrey Krug leveled the guy.
Oh,
that seems like it was a month and a half ago as well.
Robert Thomas just came back. Even though they said that wasn't related to the hit, I see no way that was unrelated.
Oh, I guess before, what have you thought about just the general level of disdain, the difference in just the nastiness, the Berubiness of this series? It's, there's been suspensions.
Right.
It's been, I don't know. I guess that's kind of I kind of just say it's all just a wash at a certain point. I think that's where I'm come down on it. But
I don't know how this take will be perceived. I didn't necessarily think Sundqvist should have gotten suspended. I think the people who say that Grzelcyk put himself in a position to get injured are stupid. But I don't really think there was malice in Sundqvist's head. There were things he could have done better to avoid that, so it didn't totally shock me that he got suspended. And where that happened was right beneath where our seats are in level 9. And I remember watching Grzelcyk just kind of laboring for a second, and it was ugly for sure.
Bad,
but I agreed more with the Barbashev suspension than I did the Sundqvist.
The Barbashev one was. I know, and this is kind of unfair, but I saw people like overlaying it with the Matt Cook, Mark Savard hit. So I think that's a little unfair.
Matt Cook has a bit different of a reputation than Ivan Barbashev.
Cook's was much more predatory than Barbashev's was. The Shen hit was kind of. Was it Shen?
Yeah, Shen on Nordstrom. Yeah,
that was kind of a
boarding. I think that was one they'd probably look at if it wasn't going to be before Game 7. Yep. But oh man, the league would get absolutely skewered if they suspended the Blues' first line center.
I think that's going to be something that's obviously people are going to be their antennas are going to be up in Game 7. But I do think that with what Berube has said, kind of calling out his team for being a little weary of how much they lacked physicality in Game 6. I think that's something to be watching.
Yeah.
Because they came out, they did that in Game 2, where they just beat the bag out of the Bruins in Game 2, where they were throwing the
and that's why the Bruins played that garbage overtime.
And I think that's where I think you're going to see that in Game 7. And I think they're going to be able to get away with a lot of it. So.
Yeah.
Whether they can... Go ahead. Can they still do it, though? That's the thing. It's, we're in the middle of June. You've been doing this for 3 months. Or for 2 months. Can you really... And I guess if you're going to find one more gear, it'd be in Game 7. But who knows? Maybe they've taken a toll on themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's a fair assessment because the playing physical exhausts you too, not just your opponent. So, I mean, we could see the type of situation where the Blues just start throwing weight the entire first period, and then they come out for the second and they're gassed. Yeah. But all this stuff with Berube about we're the least penalized team, all that nonsense. I mean, I think he just looks like an idiot.
Yeah, I agree.
And he knows damn well what he was doing after Game 3, lamenting the officiating, even though he walked it back. And I was in the press conference after Game 5, after the whole Bozak thing, and the first questions he was getting asked right after a win was, "Do you think your comments?" Basically getting asked to respond to Bruce Cassidy. He acted so annoyed about that. He knew what he was doing, and I think it did have an impact. I think with everything that's happened with the officiating this postseason, not just with the Bozak-Achari thing, the whole hand pass thing in the conference final, which the Blues, to their credit, overcame. I just think every single referee is so afraid of making the wrong call. I think that's why the Barbashev hit on Johansson didn't get anything. I think that's why they swallowed the whistle at the whole Bozak-Achari thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I think Berube at times has kind of made himself look foolish.
Yeah, I think the indignation was just the worst part about that whole thing, to sit there and be like, I can't understand why anybody would ask me questions like this.
Right. Acting like it came out of the clouds.
All right, let's do predictions.
All right.
Who do you think is going to win Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final?
I think either way, it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it's going to be close.
Okay.
And by blowout, I mean like 2-goal difference, not including an empty netter.
Okay.
I guess the Bruins, and it's just because I feel like they are so much better of a team than the Blues. And like I said at the beginning, just to bring it full circle, it'd be an abject failure if they can't beat St. Louis in this Cup final. And so, I don't know, I'll take Bruins by at least 2 goals.
Okay. I'm going to take the Blues.
Really?
I think I had the Blues in 6 before the series started. I think it's kind of played out the way I expected. I just think they're so good defensively. They're so good at keeping you out of the middle of the ice, especially, Bennington, the rebound thing is real, but the Bruins just haven't been able to get to him in a lot of instances. And I do buy some of what I was just selling about like the toll it takes on your own self to kind of play this way. But I think for one game with a chance to win the Stanley Cup, for a team that's been resilient all spring, a team that plays well on the road, I think the Blues can find that. And I just think this has a chance to be a 2-1 game. I'm kind of the opposite of what you are, but
Yeah.
like I think it's just going to be one of those things where every bit of real estate is just so hard to come by, and if that's going to be the case, I'll take the bigger, more physical team. It's a war of attrition, and I think the Blues are able to kind of just barely be the last man standing. I think if this is a heavyweight fight, the Blues win by like a contested decision after 13 rounds. Like it's really close, but they just find a way. Again, when you're talking about a Game 7, one game on probably bad ice, you never know which way the puck's going to bounce. I'll just take the Blues, I guess.
Okay.
So,
Conn Smythe?
I think Raski's away.
Really?
Or unless Ryan O'Reilly scores
right,
like 2
that's
goals.
my thing is I think it'll be Rask no matter what if the Bruins win. If the Blues win and it's close, I think it'll be Rask. But if the Blues win and it's a blowout or there's a substantial lead or O'Reilly has something big, it'll probably.
So like if the Bruins lose 2-1 and O'Reilly doesn't score, I think it's Rask. I'm like kind of the same way. So he plays well, stops like 40 shots, something like that.
Right.
I don't think he's gonna be. I don't think he's gonna test it for it. I think it's gonna be like I said. I guess we're on the opposite side of things here, but I think it's like a 2-1, 3-1 game with an empty netter. With like 25 shots each. Like I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of anything going on. Maybe I'm wrong. Those are usually the games where it ends up like being like Game 7 of Toronto last year, where it's
what was that final score? There were like 10 goals.
Yeah, you look up and it's like 3-3 after one.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll be back later this week, hopefully, to kind of dissect whatever happens in Game 7 and do a quick preview of either a parade or the offseason or both. But yeah, you'll be there.
I'll be there.
Enjoy yourself.
Thank you.
Write well.
I'll try.
I'll be on my couch. So thanks for joining us for the emergency podcast edition of the NESN Bruins podcast. We will be back again hopefully sometime later this week to discuss. Until then, enjoy the hockey game. Should be fun. It doesn't happen as often as we probably imagine it does. So enjoy it, and we'll catch you later.